Well, Gavin, when this kind of visit takes place, there are two things that are necessary, and both begin with a T. One is talks, and the other one is trust. And both of those have been severely shaken up by this bombing attack against the hospital. Basically because, as we were just hearing, the planned trip to Amman, where Joe Biden was going to meet the King of Jordan. He was also going to meet the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and the Egyptian President al-Sisi has been called off. The reason being that they say this is not the time after such an appalling bombing raid to hold a summit meeting. So that has seriously undermined President Biden's ability to show himself as a mediator in this crisis, not just for Israel, but also for the Arab world, because he's now in Tel Aviv with this surprise visit, but he's only going to be talking to the Israelis. If he talks to the Arab countries, it's going to be over the phone from Air Force One. So it's going to seriously undermine what he was hoping would be a positive visit, basically to try to open some kind of dialogue, that dialogue leading eventually to the opening of the border, the Rafah border, to let in that humanitarian supplies, those humanitarian supplies. All of that for the moment looks as though it's not going to happen anytime soon. So it's a very complicated and difficult situation for Joe Biden. And also, this is a very risky mission for Joe Biden. As we were hearing, a US president coming to the Middle East into a war zone is putting him at risk maybe a little bit less than when he was in Ukraine meeting with Ukrainian leaders. But it's still a difficult mission for the US president to make, and this mission is not going basically as Joe Biden and the US authorities hoped it would.
It's also worth pointing out, for 12 months solid, we've had protests in Israel against the Netanyahu government. Benjamin Netanyahu couldn't get a meeting with Joe Biden. Suddenly he's here at the state of emergency. What do you think, given all you've said, could be some kind of tangible success for Joe Biden, given all of these difficulties now and the lack of meetings with Middle Eastern leaders?
Well, we've been hammering this point home over the past few days. There's two objectives of the international community. One is to get that those humanitarian supplies into Gaza. They're all piled up on the border on the other side of the Rafah checkpoint in Egypt. Israel has not said that it's going to stop its bombing raids in Gaza. That is the prerequisite condition for those supplies being allowed in. The border will not be open. Egypt said it is not willing to take any Palestinians into its country because it fears there's going to be an onrush of Palestinians seeking shelter in Egypt, and they will not be allowed back into Gaza afterwards. And for them, that is definitely a no-go. So that's the first point. And the second point is to stop this from spiraling out of control into a much wider regional conflict, notably over the border between Lebanon and Israel involving Hezbollah. But not only that, if you look at the Abraham Accords and these countries that have recently signed agreements with Israel to normalize ties, like the United Arab Emirates, like Sudan, like Morocco, for example, and even the idea that there was going to be a normalization of ties between Israel and Saudi Arabia, all of that is looking pretty much, as far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, on the back burner for the time being and for the foreseeable future.
And especially as you mentioned, Philip, UAE, which had this rapprochement with the Abraham Accords, are now blaming Israel.
Exactly, and that means that they're having to deal with the anger of people in the streets protesting against what they say is injustice in Gaza, and against the government for signing a normalization deal with the Israeli authorities. So that's also posing a problem for them. And on top of that, it doesn't really matter, unfortunately, who was responsible for this bomb attack in Gaza. The damage has been done, whether it was the Israeli forces, they're denying it, whether it was Hamas, they say it wasn't them, whether it was the Islamic Jihad being pointed at them, they haven't said it was them. It doesn't really matter. The damage has been done. The image is there, and that is something that is not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to badly affect any sign or any hope of a move forward in all this conflict anytime shortly.